A warm welcome to you to this Insight lecture. It brings together two artists, Youngsook, Kögelsberger and Youngsook Choi. The Insight lectures give public platform to leaders in the field, and their work is often concerned with issues of urgent significance, and today is no exception. Environmental transformation is one of the key issues facing us as teachers, scholars, and citizens, and social and environmental justice represent the core values of our vision and strategy at Newcastle University. And these values are, of course, reflected in the title of today's lecture, Actions and Reactions to Living on a Damaged Planet. And this evocative and beautiful title is a reference to the exhibition, of course, that Ute is currently presenting at the Hatton Gallery. And I can only recommend to you, to those who haven't seen it yet, to go and see it as soon as you can. It's open on view until 24th of January 2026, but don't be me and leave it to the last day to see it. There's a lot of video work in it, so I urge you to see it now and I urge you to see it again. Hatton Gallery, of course, is celebrating its centenary this year, and I just wanted to highlight what a privilege it is for us in fine art to have Hatton Gallery as a resource and as a catalyst for conversations and for doing things with art. So this is just to say thank you for this opportunity to have this lecture in conjunction with the celebration. The significance of this Insight lecture, then, is that it's given by the artists, and I think it's important. It's an opportunity to debate the role of the visual arts in relation to social and environmental action, and it's a very exciting opportunity to be a part of this discussion. Because visual art is, of course, a visual medium, what we're going to start with is a show of works, so to show you examples of the works that we will be discussing. So we start with a brief presentation from each of the artists, and then we will be joined in discussion, after which there will be opportunity to ask questions and join with our discussion as well. But first, it is my honor to introduce our speakers today. Ute Kögelsberger is Professor of Fine Art here at Newcastle, where her achievements as an artist, educator, and research leader have been recognized through many awards. Fire Complex, a project that you'll hear more about in a moment, has been one of the flagship research projects to highlight the university's work in sustainability and social justice. Among the recent projects that Ute initiated and oversaw with characteristic energy and dedication, I want to highlight the Future Climate Talk series, which brought to Newcastle important international artists and curators. An international dimension that I've just highlighted is something that defines both the outlook of Ute's practice, which I think is right given the planetary scale of environmental disaster, but it is also reflects the international scale of recognition of her work. She is the holder of the prestigious Royal Academy Wollaston Award and has been nominated for some of the most important international prizes in photography, including Prix Pictet and the Spielmann Award. Her work has been exhibited most recently at LACMA in the USA, at the BTW Stadtforum in Austria, at the Royal Academy in London, and also outside the traditional gallery setting, on billboards on the streets of France, Britain, and the United States. And I think this is important, of course, because there's an important dimension to Ute's practice that, again, we'll discuss today, that seeks to make real change, take art outside of its institutional context and take it into the real world. So I'll just quickly mention that her project, Fire Complex, for example, served as a catalyst to replanting the sequoia forests in California that were decimated in the course of the fires that you would have all seen on television, and has also inspired new legislation to save the forests that is currently under consideration by the United States Congress. So this is something I think we'll all come back to during this discussion, the real-life agency of art. Youngsook Choi is an artist and researcher with a PhD in human geography. She is London-based, but the trajectory of her career is truly international. Her most recent projects include collaborations with the Singapore National Gallery, Seoul Museum of Art, and an important public project with Tate Modern in London. Youngsook has worked with various institutions and communities such as Barbican Centre and Liverpool Biennial in the UK, Documenta in Germany, and Seoul Media City Biennale in Korea, to name just a few of those. Some of this work has been funded by the British Academy and Arts Council England in recognition of the significance of Youngsook's work on climate crisis, which she often confronts through the experience of grief. Youngsook is the founder of the Transnational Eco-Grief Council, Foreshadowing, and is the co-founder of the research practice working group Decolonizing Botany. So I first give the floor presentation to Youngsook, and it will be followed by a presentation from Uta. So please join me in welcoming Youngsook to stage, please.
Thank you, everyone. How are you? Yeah, it's quite good turnout in cold weather. We really appreciate you making here. Today we're talking about grief. It's a difficult subject. Can I ask you how many of you personally experienced grief in your life? Yeah, quite many. But we are talking about particularly about ecological grief. It's a quite new idea to many people, but also it is very much ongoing situation. So my practice is all around ecological grief, looking at the sites of environmental destruction, also the community impacted by it. So yeah, I'm going to share about the few projects around the idea of ecological grief. Slide is not moving. Okay. So I'd like to share, how I theoretically frame collective grief around ecological loss. I'm looking at grief more than mourning, more than being in the space of sadness. I'm looking at grief as a socio-political autopsy. Just imagine when you go to funeral or wake, what's the question, common question people share in that situation? What is the cause of loss? Is that right? Yeah. So one will start talking about, this person died out of cancer. And someone will say, yeah, she died of cancer because of her life was stressful. And then someone will start talking about what was the causes of stress. So if you keep interrogating the cause of loss, you get to the picture of a structural conditioning of one's life. So that's how I see the collective grief as an interrogation process. When you come around the loss as a community and interrogating what is the cause behind the loss, you get to the picture of the system that repeats the pattern of similar violence again and again. So I'm interested in that frame around the grief. And also I'm inspired by the Judith Butler's proposition of grievability. Butler says, not all lives deserve same amount of grief. So Butler brings the example when 9/11 happened in America, there was a kind of world-scale grief. But when Iraqi war happened, not the same scale of grief happened for the millions of civilians died in Iraqi war. So we're talking about the hierarchy between human lives. But when you're talking about ecosystem, there's certain hierarchy. Human lives is much more valuable than other species. So there is the idea of grievability that systematically causing the violence repeatedly. So I'm interested in interrogating this idea of grievability through the practice of ecological grief. And essentially, ecological grief is about bringing the moment we are not alone. It's about recovering the love, interspecies love. We are just a part of the ecosystem. We're not the protagonist. We're not the kind of on top of this botanical taxonomic system, but we are in this horizontal structure that is just part of the planetary system. So the ecological grief is about bringing this, the idea of, we are part of it, and therefore we need to take care of it at the interspecies level. As Olga explained, my primary discipline is geography. So all my practices are happening not so much in the gallery space, but at the sites. This is the St. Helens in northern England. It used to be the mining town. And last about 3 decades, the land has been taken care by the forest management. But as you can see, there's a kind of little black dot part of the land. There's the patch of the land that refuses to grow anything, even after the decades of care. And when I saw the land, it was quite powerful, encounter. The land almost looks like wants to remain as a reminder what happened to the land, because that land used to be the clay pit when everything used to be made in clay, before plastic, before glass. And then after clay pit, it became mining site. And then after mining site, it became the dumping ground of glass manufacturing, because St. Helens is famous for the glass manufacturing. So if you look at the land as your body, you can imagine the assault that happened over centuries. So even the land is thriving almost like in a green field. That particular patch of land still wants to remain, and it is in a way still in the state of grief. So that's the one of the site I'm working around. And as you can see, there's a kind of particular channels, and this is I wouldn't call it land art. Some people like to call it land art, but I don't use land to bring the form of art. I'm interested in inventing and devising community ritual in the context of ecological grief. Especially in this site, I'm working with a group of women who are domestic violence survivors. Because if you go to any post-industrial town, there's immense social declining. So when it comes to the ecological grief, it doesn't make sense only talking about ecological destruction. You need to intersect between ecological trauma and social trauma. So that is the kind of the organizing witnessing community with this group of women is my kind of endeavor to intersecting these two kind of traumas. And annually, we cut the reed bed in certain ways. We create kind of 5 channels. So that was the first year's ritual. And this December will be 2nd year, and then next year will be the last and 3rd year of a reed cutting ritual. And this one on the right side is based on my research in Malaysian rainforest and regarding to the tin mining history. Malaysia used to be the largest tin producer under British colonial rule, and all the blue dots you can see is actually the artificially created lakes. As a consequence of tin mining, because the tin dredging, it's such a violent process. It left to kind of permanently the lakes, and so I'm kind of juxtaposing the elephant and the geography of Perak region, because the elephant has been displaced, displaced from the shrinking forest. And my research around this Malaysian rainforest is all through the angle of elephant diaspora. Also, one thing I'm really interested in what I call formless knowing. This is the approach of feminist geographer. When you come to the site, when you come to the field of research, you don't come with the ego, or you don't come with a determined idea or prescription how you want to do research, what data you want to make out of it. I love the idea, just come to the site and listen to it and wait for it. And And that formless knowing sometimes reveals multi-layered stories. So I'm really interested in that approach in terms of developing the project and finding about the site. Okay, already 1 minute. So next project is about the Brent Reservoir. Brent is one of the London boroughs. And in this project, I was interested in how carbon industry is impacted kind of immense scale of the landscape. When you're talking about mining, coal mining, you often only thinking of a mining site, right? But when I was researching about Brent Reservoir, I found that Brent Reservoir was created to supply water for the Grand Union Canal. When Grand Union Canal was the major public transport for the coals excavated from northern England. So if you think about the landscape altered by carbon industry, the scale is immense. There's a mining site, and there's a waterway that carries the coals, and then there's a reservoir artificially created to supply the water to the waterway. So we are kind of looking at this kind of huge ecological trauma that is attached to carbon industry. So this video is made of the performance that I formed with the sailors around the Brent Reservoir, because as we know, sailing was the fundamental technology for the colonial conquest and extraction. I don't think we'll have a time to see all the video, but the video is also layered with the sound archive of mining in northern England from British Library, which is overlaid with the professional moaning sound of a Kurdish migrant. I'll just skip through. So the performance ended by declaring the climate emergency by sailors. The last slide is about the recent performance at Tate, which commemorates 7 lost glaciers in 21st century. It was formed as a search party. I'm really interested in search party as artistic language regarding the idea of anticipatory grief. When you are in search party, your mind goes to extremes. You are hopeful for the life that might be still alive. And at the same time, you holding this anticipatory grief, that person may not be alive. So search party in a way is like a collective practice of the intense empathy. So I'm really interested in search party as a form of witnessing climate grief. And in this case, I secretly drew 7 glacial figures in the gallery in UV marker, so in your bare eyes you cannot see it. So it happened in outside the gallery hours when it's dark. So the participants was given the UV torch, so they had to find the hidden figures. So whenever we found a glacier figure, we read about the particular glacier and have a little intimate commemorating moment.
see. I'm going to cheat. Hi, everybody. Oh, I need to use the microphone. Is it working? Hi, everybody. It's really great to see you here all this evening. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you about this project that's currently on show at the Hatton Gallery. But I would like to start by thanking Stephanie and Umbreen for inviting me to be part of this Insight lecture series. And also, of course, the Hatton Gallery for inviting me to do this exhibition in their venue at this really significant time where they're celebrating a 100-year anniversary. Like Olga says, the Hatton is plays such an important role in the life of the university and in our department and also in Newcastle. So I'm delighted to be part of that history. As the title of the exhibition indicates, some kind of love, actions and reactions to living on a damaged planet, brings together 4 bodies of work that each in their own way explore our complex relationship to the environment, to the world that we live in, the relentless cycle of destruction and reconstruction that we've set up in relationship to this world, and our desire to control the natural world and our often failed attempts to do so. There are 4 bodies of work that come together in this exhibition, and I hope you either have seen it or will have the opportunity to go to see it, because right here, of course, with 10 minutes, I don't have the time to get into the nitty-gritty of the exhibition. However, what I would like to touch on and what I would like to maybe lay out a little bit is what I think we as artists and people working in the cultural sector can contribute to this conversation around the climate emergency. I believe we occupy a very unique position in this field. We are able to inspire, we're able to bring people together, we're able to trigger empathy and care. And I think that's a very privileged position to hold. And it's something that is often, I think, underrated and underestimated. And I think that fact of underestimating it is actually kind of a strength, because it means that we can operate under the radar. So here, all I have time to do is to talk about one project, which kind of started by working under the radar and then triggered quite significant difference beyond the radar. It is a project that I started in the US in 2020 after the Castle fire destroyed 174,000 acres of forest, including 14% of the world's giant sequoia population. Now, the reason that matters, why the sequoias matter so much, of course, is in part because of the amazing beings that they are. They've been around for over 3,000 years, many of them. But also they are incredible stores of carbon. So a giant sequoia can store up to 1,400 tons of carbon in their lifetime, in comparison to, say, an oak that stores maybe 7.7 tons of carbon. You can see at the bottom left-hand corner, you see my husband next to a giant sequoia, which gives you a sense of the scale of the trees. The Castle fire devastated our community, and it was amplified by over 100 years of fire mismanagement, of forest mismanagement. And it was devastating to see that we are in part responsible for what happened there. In one afternoon, the fire wiped out what took 3,500 years to grow. I felt it was absolutely critical to make a work that responded to that and to make a work that steps beyond just visualizing a problem, but it actually sets out to make a difference. So I started by following the cleanup process after the wildfires. That work, and here again, I have to say I can only very briefly touch on things, was first shown in downtown Los Angeles alongside a billboard takeover of the town. So here we have a situation where I think cause and symptom are brought together in the same place. Over half the human population lives in urban environments. We're often very removed from these problems that we're creating with our actions. And here there's a reminder in a kind of unexpected situation, and I am particularly interested in picking up on this language of advertising and subverting it through an unexpected encounter. So the work appeared at the same time as a citywide billboard takeover, which documented these giant sequoias that had been burned. These works were connected to QR codes to show people ways to get involved into the recovery process around the forest. And here there's an iteration of the work during COP26 at Shepherd's Bush roundabout. In parallel to putting together these works, I also devised a collaborative replanting project, which first happened in collaboration with the Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, which is an organization which goes around the world cloning what they call champion trees. These are trees that are expected to survive longer because they've lived longer. And they had come to our community, which has the 5th biggest tree in the world, the stag tree, and cloned 2 trees prior to the fires. And they then donated 150 of these clones to us in an effort to also raise attention to their cause. So we had a lot of attention in this first replanting effort, even though it was a very small amount of trees. And that then led to a second replanting effort in collaboration with USDA Forest Services, which put over 6,500 trees back into the ground. And to come back slightly on this notion that as artists we have the ability to cut across, to bring people together to cut across social, political, and economic divides. Here you see people that have come together from the replanting effort, and they are really from all opposite spectrums of the political system, which is something that happens very rarely in the US. People have stopped talking to each other across these divisionist politics. But here we have the Rotary Club with Democrats, with everybody working together on a shared goal. This initiative put over 6,500 trees back in the ground, which was such an important thing to do then, because now invasive species come in before the natural environment can grow back, because the climate has changed so drastically. We collaborated with the Rotary Club, which has really strong political connections and economic connections and agency. And they managed to, because of this collaboration, we managed to get the attention of 6 bipartisan congressmen who came up to visit our community after our replanting effort. These congressmen then signed the Save the Sequoias Act, which was put forward to Congress. And it did not pass Congress, but it gave Forest Services the agency to introduce emergency measures in fire prevention in giant sequoia groves. So in the subsequent year, there was a massive fire that destroyed further giant sequoia groves, and I believe that what we did had a direct impact on saving some of these amazing ecosystems. So this is a project that started from a very personal experience, went through visual incarnations, and then materialized in a way that I never anticipated. So here you see me last Christmas with the giant sequoias, 3 years after replanting, and they're doing very well. The work then went on to be shown at the Royal Academy, where it won the Wollaston Award, and it has since been, this is the installation in the Hatton Gallery, and it has been acquired by LACMA, the LA County Museum, to be included in its collections. So now it has an existence in the art world. In that sense, I think of my practice as a sort of multi-tentacled beast that brings together processes of sense-making and sense-making to engage people in these conversations, but then also actively tries to make a difference beyond that field. And with that, since I think we are pressed for time, maybe, have I got 1 minute to maybe show a very short section of the recent, so this is a section of the work, but I'm going to skip that because I think you can go and see that in the exhibition. But one of the reasons I was so interested in inviting Youngsook to speak alongside me today is because this body of work led on to a whole series of work that all came from a very strong position of climate grief. And in the exhibition at the Hatton Gallery, there's a work that seeks a kind of form of healing that some of the people in this audience, I think, were a part of in a second incarnation in Jasmine Dean, singing it back to health. But here we have a collaboration with the Brussels Opera Youth Choir in a work that starts from the premise that if we play music to plants, it accelerates their growth and improves their immune system, setting out to sing forest ecosystems back to health with a song of love. Okay, stopping rather brutally here. But I believe we are pressed for time because we want to open it up to this in conversation and then to audience question, and maybe by stopping here, more motivation to go to see the show at the Hatton. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for these presentations. And I just want to start with a kind of a very obvious question, but I think that the one that might be interesting for our audience is that how did you get involved in fighting the climate crisis, and what's at stake for you personally?
Maybe two things. After personally experiencing grief over my late dad, and I found grief is really powerful place. And also essentially, we had this conversation with Uta, essentially really anti-capitalistic space. You know, we live in the society, every second you get this message, you need to be happy. Go and get nice clothes, buy a bigger house, get promotion, then you will be happy. But when you are in the space of grief, you don't give a damn to any of this. You stop thinking about being happy. I think it's really powerful. In this system we're living right now, refuse to be happy is the most radical thing I could imagine. So I was always always drawn to the idea of grief and the possibility, like a transformative possibility of grief. And then 2019, I think, the incident happened, the incident called SX39. I don't know whether you remember that. It was a big headliner. The 39 Vietnamese people found dead in the back of a lorry while they're trying to cross the border illegally. Do you remember that tragedy? But what the mainstream media didn't tell you around that incident is that why they crossed the borders. That incident grabbed lots of attention, particularly because of the victims are so young, and the youngest victim was 15 years old. And these people are mainly from two fishing villages in central Vietnam, where the Formosa marine disaster happened. The multinationals still cooperate Formosa directly dispose the toxic waste into the ocean. And these two towns their main livelihood is based on fishing and the tourism. When the whole marine ecosystem was destroyed, they had 70 tons of dead fish on the beach, on the shore. And the situation was really horrific. And then the young people became really desperate. And so that's how it happened. But the mainstream media didn't tell you. Around the time, they actually instrumentalized this incident to kind of feed a narrative. We need to tighten the border. The people smugglers are really issue. But they didn't really talk about what happened in their town. So that incident really revealed to me the complex kind of layers of the structure we're living through. That incident got to do with the neoliberal, I don't know how to neocolonial kind of operation of a multinational corporate, and that is connected to environmental destruction and also the brutal border regime. So it revealed lots of the complex issues around the world system we're living through. So out of that incident, I developed a work called Not This Future, which is bringing 39 video offerings from the artists, curators, researchers whose practices are around this subject. So I kind of edited 39 video offerings and then responded to these offerings in a sequential performance. So the first sequence is about cleansing 39 fish bodies, and second sequence is tearing off the fabric muslin. Muslin is the fabric of birth and death in many traditions. When new baby is born, you wrap the body in muslin. When someone dies, you also wrap the body in muslin. So second sequence is tearing off this muslin. The third part is obviously wrapping each cleansed fish body in muslin. But when I finished the project, I felt the project hasn't really completed because it was mainly about grieving 39 human loss. And I felt I need to extend my remit of grief towards, the species that we lost in the whole Formosa marine disaster. That's how I started my extensive research and practice around ecological grief. It was a bit long.
Thank you. I don't know, Uta, if you want to add.
I got completely carried away. It was the question of how we started working around climate change or climate grief.
How does it know? So the question was what's at stake for you personally? Because inevitably those questions, those very strong convictions come from a personal place.
I think it became, thank you for sharing this, Youngsook, for a very powerful story and very powerful work. I think as became clear in the talk, I mean, I've been working with man-nature relations for a very long time, but I think there was a clear moment of shift after the fire destroyed our community in the temperature of the work, right? So from work that was initially more reflective and observational to work that actively sought to make a difference. So I think people have caught on to the fact probably that I was resident in that community, that a part resident in the community that was destroyed by the castle fire, through marriage, and the experience of losing that forest was absolutely devastating, and was something that I really needed to react to from a personal level, personal perspective. But beyond that, I think climate change is one of the subjects in our world where so many of our societal problems come to a peak. It's about it's about equity, it's about our future, it's about the environment. There's so many issues that are concentrated in that spot. And I think as citizens, not only as artists, it's our civic responsibility to use everything that we can do to try to make a difference. And it doesn't matter how small it is. It could be a tiny thing, but we have to do something, because if we don't do anything, there's no change. And without change in this current situation, I don't see much of a future.
This is really interesting, because it sounds to me what emerges here is that the impulse is very much comes from a place of vulnerability, the experience of personal grief, or the experience of the strong negative emotions. But I think, and this is something that I think is really striking in Uta's exhibition, is the way that the artwork doesn't just leave there, that the way that the artwork transcends and strikes this very difficult balance between extinction and redemption, between loss of hope and continuity of hope. And this is, I think, something that maybe we can think alongside the work that artwork is doing, quite apart from making a real change in the world, as we have seen with relation to your fire complex project. That it also it creates like this shift in thinking, that it does bring you closer to a possibility of hope.
Yeah, and I would like to intersect there, saying that I was lucky to be able to attend Youngsook's a performance at Tate, and it was an incredibly powerful moment, because there was about 20 of us searching for these glaciers that we couldn't see, and that was such a powerful metaphor for this loss that we've already experienced, and then to go through this communal performance of the almost like a little mini memorial service for each glacier was an incredibly moving moment.
Wonderful. Thank you for bringing this in. I'd like to also ask a question about the place of research in your practice, because I think it's important for both of you. The place of research as practice, perhaps, but also the places of research, the way you make this research happen. Is that interesting as a question?
Do you want to start, Youngsook?
You mean the place, like as a site, or
whichever way you would like to interpret this? But I think, like for both of you,
I think
in this current context, I think it's important to highlight that you're artists and researchers, and I'm interested in the role of research and how research becomes practice.
It's been a really interesting question as an artist. There has been kind of a lot of discourse around the research-based art practice and research-informed art practice, and I don't like any of this expression. I think in my practice, research and creative conviction, it works almost a symbiotic system. And also, I don't like the idea of process-driven art practice. I think process itself is outcome in this symbiotic relationship between research and creative conviction. And for example, my long-term project in Every Bite of the Emperor, I started that project in November 2021, and it hasn't finished, and I don't know when it will end. And it kind of interweaves 3 different sites across Northern England, Malaysia, Central Vietnam. And the places, choice of places are also coming almost as a serendipity, because as we go along, the stories itself is kind of connecting, almost like the land itself writes its own story. So I think going back to your question, I think it comes from two different places. Obviously, there's intention to organizing ecological grief and collective witnessing. Also, it's also serendipity. It's as I said, I kind of position sight and field as a knower. Coming from kind of a deep, humble place, I don't know anything about them. I just go there and spend enough time, at least 1 year, because you need to spend the land, spend any ecosystem through 4 seasons cycle. So just stay there and listen to it and try to find the moment that the knowledge comes from the land, comes from the bodies of water. And then the serendipity happens. So that story that emerged from the site will tell you where to go next.
Thank you, that's fascinating. Ute?
Yeah, I mean, I think that puts it really the nail in the head. That explains it very well. It's another way of describing a very situated practice that comes from within, doesn't it? You don't come in as a kind of with a helicopter perspective. You have to live in the situation. You have to get close to people. It relies very heavily on collaboration. So research is not something that is done by going into a library and reading a book. It's research that is actually, it's almost close to an anthropological exercise in some ways, but then being much more within, from within.
And it sounds like in both of your cases, it's also subject to temporal scales that we're not fully in control of. You know, it could be dependent on the seasons, as you mentioned, it could be the weather, and it takes time. Yeah. I think that's also something to highlight in relation to your practice, that it's time-based in all kinds of ways.
So, but there's, I mean, obviously there's a lot of factual elements that also drive the work within that. So, for example, there are shocking numbers that go along with the wildfires in California. In 2018, the cost of the wildfires to the California economy was $134 billion, which is a huge amount of money. The amount of money that was invested into wildfire prevention in that same year was $500 million. So those kinds of things kind of are really strong motivating factors, right? This is a study was first done by UC Davis, which was considering all the kind of impact that the fires had, not just on the destruction of property, but also on health, on economy, on tourism, etc., 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 etc.